What Jesus taught about money that nobody tells you. Introduction. Have you ever stopped to think about why so many people work hard their entire lives, earn money, accumulate possessions, but still wake up in the middle of the night with that tightness in their chest, that inexplicable anguish? Why does the bank account grow while peace diminishes? Why hasn't financial success brought the freedom it promised, but only new fears, new prisons, new anxieties? Here is a truth that goes against everything you've been taught. The problem isn't having money or not having money. The problem is that nobody taught you the correct relationship with it. And do you know who spoke more about money, wealth, and provision than any other subject? Jesus Christ. That's right, Jesus, who never owned a home, never opened a business, never accumulated fortune, dedicated an immense part of his teachings to talk about how you handle material resources. Why? Because he knew something that most people take a lifetime to discover or never discover. The way you treat money reveals who you really are inside. When God speaks to the heart about finances, he's not just interested in your pocket, he's interested in your soul, your freedom, your purpose. You're about to discover a parable that Jesus told over 2,000 years ago, but that could have been written yesterday morning looking directly at your situation. A story about 3 servants, 3 choices, and 3 completely different destinies, and you'll identify with at least one of them. Perhaps even be scared by how much this story seems to know your most secret fears. God saw your pain when you worked so hard and saw so little result. You are not alone. God is with you on this journey of discovering what it really means to be prosperous in heaven's eyes. Stay until the end, because what you're going to learn here can change not only your bank account, but your entire mindset about success, purpose, and what really matters in this short life we're living. God heard your prayer, asking for a better way, and perhaps the answer is in the next lines. When everything seemed lost and you wondered if it would be worth continuing to try, know that God acts in silence, preparing ancient teachings to reach you at exactly the right moment. The tears that God sees are not ignored. Every financial frustration, every fear of tomorrow, every sleepless night thinking about bills, he sees all of this. And today, through a simple but deeply transformative parable, he wants to show you that heaven is silent, but God is acting to free you from prisons you didn't even know you were living in. So take a deep breath, open your heart, and prepare to have your vision of money, work, and purpose completely revolutionized by the wisdom of Jesus Christ. Because having faith in Jesus Christ isn't just about going to heaven after death. It's about living with freedom, purpose, and true abundance here and now. Starting with the choices you make today, with what's in your hands. The context there is a truth that few stop to reflect on deeply. We live in a society where money has become the thermometer of human value. When God speaks to someone's heart about prosperity, he's not just dealing with numbers in a bank account, but with a complete transformation of mindset. In the time when Jesus walked the earth, there was an ingrained belief that material wealth was clear evidence of divine approval, while poverty would be a sign of curse or hidden sin. Just imagine, you woke up every day seeing rich people being treated as blessed and poor people being marginalized as cursed. But then comes Jesus, this carpenter who had nowhere to lay his head, and starts turning everything upside down. He didn't come with a golden chariot or wearing prince's clothes. He came simple, humble, but with an authority that made the powerful tremble. And you know what he did? He began to teach that God sustained me has nothing to do with the size of your house or the amount of coins in your pocket. This turnaround scared many people because it messed with power structures and beliefs that had seemed unshakable for generations. Christ's message brought something revolutionary. Money isn't the problem. The heart enslaved by it is what destroys lives. Think with me for a moment. How many people do you know who earn well but live imprisoned by the anxiety of losing everything? When everything seemed lost for those who had much but had no peace, Jesus pointed to a different reality. He never said be poor to be holy, but he also never said accumulate riches to prove you're blessed. What he taught was something much deeper and more liberating, that you are not alone. God is with you, regardless of the balance in your account. This understanding completely changes the game, because it removes the crushing weight of defining your value by what you possess. It's as if Jesus was saying, relax. Your Heavenly Father knows what you need before you even ask. But attention. This doesn't mean crossing your arms and waiting for money to fall from heaven like manna. It means understanding that there's a greater purpose behind every resource that passes through your hands, and that God saw your pain when you felt inferior for having less than others. What's interesting is to observe how Jesus chose to approach this delicate subject. He could have made long theological discourses about economics or written treatises on personal finance, but that wasn't the chosen path. Instead, he told simple stories, parables that anyone from fisherman to Pharisee could understand on the surface, but that carried deep layers of wisdom. These stories had the power to plant seeds that germinated over time in the hearts of those who heard them. When God heard your prayer asking for clarity about how to deal with financial matters, often the answer comes through these ancient parables that remain alive and relevant. Jesus knew that human beings learn better through narratives than through cold rules. That's why his lessons about money, work, and provision come wrapped in stories of servants, vineyards, talents, and treasures. Each parable was like a wisdom time bomb, ready to explode at the right moment in each listener's life. But let's return to that historical context for a moment, because it's fundamental to understand where Jesus was speaking from. First-century Jewish society had a complex relationship with wealth. On one hand, they saw prosperity as divine blessing. On the other, the prophets had already warned about the oppression of the poor by the rich. There was a gigantic internal conflict. The Pharisees, for example, loved money and justified it religiously, saying that God materially rewarded the righteous. But then comes Jesus and begins to heal lepers, eat with tax collectors, considered traitors, and say things like, "It's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God." Imagine the shock. The tears that God sees are not only those of the poor who suffer need, but also those of the rich who live empty despite abundance. Jesus was showing that heaven is silent, but God is acting in ways that our limited mind can barely comprehend. He was completely rebalancing the spiritual GPS of an entire nation. And here is something crucial we need to understand. Jesus wasn't creating a new religion of poverty, but exposing the futility of building life on foundations that can crumble. He saw daily people destroying relationships for money, families falling apart over inheritances, and hearts hardening through greed. God acts in the silence of these human dramas, waiting for the right moment to intervene and show that there's a better way. When Jesus spoke about money, he was onto just giving financial advice. He was offering a completely different worldview about what really matters in life. Think of practical examples. A father who works 16 hours a day to give the best to his children, but is never present for them. A woman who accumulates material goods but lives terrified with the possibility of losing everything in an economic collapse. A young person who chooses a lucrative career they hate instead of following their true vocation. Jesus looked at all this and saw imprisoned people, not free ones. And he came to bring freedom, including genuine financial freedom, the kind that is born from the inside out. Having faith in Jesus Christ in this context means trusting that he has a better plan for your life than simply accumulating resources. The parable of the talents. The story of the 3 servants, the parable that Jesus told about the talents, is one of the most well-known, but also one of the most misinterpreted in Christian history. Imagine the scene: a very rich, powerful man, one of those who commanded immense properties and had dozens of servants working for him. This man needed to travel to distant lands, a long journey that would take time, perhaps months, perhaps years. Before departing, he makes a decision that would forever change the lives of 3 specific servants. He calls them one by one and gives each one a significant amount of money, measured in talents, which at the time was a considerable fortune, not coins of little value. When God speaks to the heart through this story, he's revealing principles about trust, responsibility, and what we do with what is entrusted to us. The first servant received 5 talents, the second received 2, and the third received only 1. But pay attention to this crucial detail that many people skip. Each one received according to his ability. It wasn't arbitrary, it wasn't unfair, it was personalized, strategic thought specifically for each individual. Now, let's get into the skin of these servants for a moment, because this makes the story much more real and tangible. The first guy receives 5 talents. This would be the equivalent today of receiving, I don't know, about $500,000 to invest. Can you imagine the responsibility, but also the excitement? This servant didn't waste time. He went out, worked, negotiated, took intelligent risks and multiplied it by 2. He turned 5 into 10 talents. The second servant, who received 2 talents, did exactly the same thing. He didn't complain, but I received less than the other. He didn't compare himself. He didn't enter into victimhood. He took what he had, worked with excellence, and also doubled it, turned 2 into 4 talents. You are not alone. God is with you when you decide to work with what you have in your hands. Without looking to the side, seeing what the other received. These 2 servants understood something fundamental. The size of the opportunity matters less than what you do with it. They didn't sleep on their laurels, didn't procrastinate waiting for perfect conditions. They acted with what they had when they had it. But then comes the third servant, and this part of the story is where things get really interesting and uncomfortable. This guy received 1 talent less than the other 2. It's true, but still a significant amount. Nothing despicable. But instead of doing anything productive with that resource, he had a completely different reaction. Fear took over him. God saw your pain, your fears, your insecurities, but also saw the choice he made to surrender to fear. The servant thought, what if I lose? What if I invest and it goes wrong? What if my master returns and I don't have his money? So, dominated by analysis paralysis, he made the safest decision he could imagine. He took a shovel, dug a hole in the ground, and buried that talent. He hid it, kept it, preserved it. In his head, he was being prudent, cautious, responsible. He thought he was protecting what was entrusted to him. But Jesus is about to show that there's a huge difference between prudence and paralysis, between wisdom and cowardly fear that prevents you from living. Time passed, and here the parable makes a time cut, like in good movies, and the master returned from the journey. The moment of accountability arrived, that moment that defines everything, that separates those who acted from those who just waited. The master calls the servants and asks, "What did you do with what I entrusted to you?" The first servant arrives excited, confident, and presents 10 talents where before there were 5. The master's response is celebrated, exciting, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful in little, I will put you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." When God heard your prayer asking for an opportunity, He wasn't just testing you, He was preparing you for greater responsibilities. The second servant receives exactly the same response, word for word, because what mattered wasn't the absolute quantity, but the relative faithfulness. For talents or 10 talents, what counted was the attitude, the effort, the multiplication. These 2 entered a new dimension of responsibility and joy. But when it's the third servant's turn, the atmosphere changes completely. He approaches nervously, unearthing that talent dirty with earth, and begins to justify himself. "Master, I knew you are a severe man, who reaps where you did not sow, and gathers where you did not scatter. I was afraid and hid your talent in the earth. Here is what is yours." Seems like a reasonable defense, doesn't it? He returned it whole, didn't steal, didn't spend it on parties. But the master's response was devastating. Wicked and slothful servant. Wicked and slothful. Two heavy, painful words. You knew that I reap where I did not sow. Then you should have at least put my money in the bank to earn interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10. When everything seemed lost for this servant, he realized that his security was actually his ruin. God acts in silence, but also acts at harvest time, and here the harvest has arrived. The tears that God sees at this moment are not of compassion for the lazy servant, but of justice being done. Heaven is silent, but God is acting through this lesson that echoes for 2,000 years. You will not be judged by what you did and receive, but by what you did with what you received. And having faith in Jesus Christ means trusting enough to risk, to multiply, to not bury your gifts and opportunities out of fear of failure. The practical lesson to apply in life today, perhaps at this exact moment you're thinking, okay, I understood the parable, but how does this apply to my practical life? And it's precisely here that the rubber meets the road, where teaching stops being beautiful theory and becomes real transformation. How many times have you already said or heard someone say, I have little now, but when I have more, then I'll do differently? Or, when I earn better, then I'll start to invest, to help others, to use my talents. When God speaks to the heart through this parable, he is exposing a lie that humanity has believed for millennia. The lie that you need to wait to have enough before starting to act. Jesus teaches exactly the opposite. Be faithful in little. Use what you have now. Stop burying your gifts, opportunities and resources waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. You know that popular saying, it's by giving that we receive. It's not just a cliche, it's a spiritual principle proven by countless generations. God sustained me is not a phrase you say after getting up there. It's a declaration you make when you're still in the valley, using the little you have with excellence and faithfulness. Let's make this even more practical and tangible, because I know you want concrete examples you can apply Monday morning. If you have only $50 left over at the end of the month, due on say, it's too little to make a difference. Invest in a cheap online course that develops a skill. Buy a book that expands your mind, like Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, or The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason, or help someone who is in an even more difficult situation than yours. If you have $500, open an account at a brokerage and start investing. Even if it's little, learn about treasury bonds, investment funds, stocks of solid companies. The amount doesn't matter as much as the habit you're creating. You are not alone. God is with you on this journey of financial learning, even when you make mistakes at the beginning. If you have free time, don't say, when I have a better job, then I'll use my time well. Use it now. Learn a new language on Duolingo. Do volunteer work. Develop a side project. Study the Bible more deeply. Time is a talent as precious as money, and are you burying or multiplying it? But the lesson goes far beyond finances and time management. It touches on something even deeper. The courage to risk when everything inside you screams to play it safe. God saw your pain when you were rejected at that interview, when that business didn't work out, when you invested in something and lost. These scars are real and hurt. But Jesus is saying through this parable, do not let the fear of new pain completely paralyze you. The third servant had every reason to be cautious. The master was really demanding, and losing that talent could have terrible consequences. But the irony is that, in trying to avoid the worst possible scenario, he guaranteed that the worst scenario would happen. When God heard your prayer asking for direction about that difficult decision, changing careers, starting a business, investing in training, confronting a problem in the relationship, the answer often comes as a whisper. Take the step, I am with you. It's not a guarantee that it will be easy or that you woe and stumble along the way. It's the guarantee that inaction and fear are worse than the calculated risk taken with faith. Now, a practical exercise that will hurt but needs to be done. Take a paper and pen, can be on the phone too, whatever, and make an honest list of everything you have buried in your life. What talents, abilities, dreams, financial resources, relationships, opportunities are stopped, kept hidden out of fear? Maybe it's that business idea you never got off paper. Maybe it's the artistic gift you don't develop because it doesn't make money. Maybe it's the money sitting in savings, earning less than inflation because you're afraid to invest. Maybe it's the time you spend scrolling through Instagram feed when you could be building something significant. When everything seemed lost and you thought you had nothing of value to offer, God was waiting for you to look again and discover the buried talent. God acts in silence while you do this painful but necessary reflection. After listing, choose one thing, just one, and commit to unearthing it this week. It doesn't have to be everything at once, but it needs to be something. A first concrete, measurable step with a defined deadline. And here's the liberating truth that changes everything. Money, talents, opportunities, none of this reveals who you are. It only amplifies who you already are. If you're generous with $100, you'll be generous with 100,000. If you're lazy with little work, you'll be lazy with much. If you're faithful in small responsibilities, you'll be faithful in large ones. The tears that God sees when you feel insignificant or incapable are not of pity, but of paternal love waiting for you to wake up to the gigantic potential inside you. Heaven is silent, but God is acting through the small daily choices you make. Waking up earlier to study, cutting unnecessary expenses to invest. Getting off the couch to take that course, calling that person and apologizing, sending that resume even with fear of rejection. Jesus doesn't want money to control you. He wants you to control money as a wise and faithful steward. Having faith in Jesus Christ, in the end, means trusting that He equipped you with everything you need for the season you're in, and that your responsibility is not to compare your one talent with someone else's 5, but to multiply that one with all the excellence excellence and dedication you can muster. When you do your part, moving despite fear, working with what you have in your hands, God does his part, and his part is always supernatural, always beyond what you imagined. The spiritual freedom that comes from the correct relationship with money, there's a freedom that the world doesn't know, a peace that transcends any logical understanding, and it comes when you finally understand your true relationship with money. It's not about having much or having little. It's about being free from the psychological and spiritual slavery that money exerts on billions of people. When God speaks to the heart about provision and prosperity, he's not just talking about numbers growing in a bank account. He's talking about an interior transformation so deep that it literally changes the way you wake up in the morning and sleep at night. Think of the people you know who have plenty of money but live terrified, sleeping poorly, with ulcers, generalized anxiety, taking controlled medication. Then think of those simple people who have little but overflow with joy, generosity, and peace. The difference isn't in the bank balance, it's in inner freedom. God sustained me is not a phrase about having unlimited financial security. It's about having unlimited confidence in the one who sustains. Jesus lived this radically. He didn't have his own house, depended on the generosity of others for his basic needs. But we never see him anxious, desperate, or afraid of lack. He was free because he knew that the Father cared for him. But let's be honest and practical about what this freedom really means day to day. Because we're not talking about a mystical concept distant from reality. Spiritual financial freedom means you can sleep peacefully even when the market collapses, because you didn't build your life on quicksand. It means you can be generous without calculating if it will hurt you, because you trust that what you give returns multiplied. It means you make decisions based on purpose and not just on salary. You can refuse that proposal that pays more but would destroy your family. You can invest time in relationships instead of just in financial returns. You are not alone. God is with you when you choose to live according to these principles that contradict the world's logic. The world says accumulate, protect, distrust. Jesus says multiply, share, trust. These are two radically opposite philosophies. The first generates ulcers and anxiety. The second generates peace and purpose. Think of concrete examples. A couple who decides to live below their means to be able to give more and invest in the kingdom versus a couple drowning in debt, trying to impress neighbors they do on even like. Which one is really free? The parable of the talents reveals something revolutionary. Jesus doesn't free us from money by saying ignore it completely, but frees us through money when we learn to manage it with heavenly wisdom. God saw your pain when you felt trapped in a vicious cycle of working just to pay bills, with nothing left over for dreams, purpose, or generosity. But He also sees the way out of this cycle, and it usually involves difficult decisions you've been postponing. Cutting that streaming service you barely use, selling that financed car that bleeds you every month to buy a paid-off used one, stopping eating out 5 times a week, cancelling that credit card that became a snowball. When God heard your prayer asking for a financial miracle, perhaps the answer wasn't money falling from heaven, but wisdom to better manage what already passes through your hands. You know how many people earn 3,000 and live in debt, while others earn 3,000 and still manage to invest. The difference is in the mindset, in character, in discipline, things that the parable of the talents is trying to awaken in you. But here's the crucial point that ties everything together. When everything seemed lost, and you thought you'd never get out of the financial, emotional, or spiritual hole you found yourself in, God was preparing a way. God acts in silence, planting seeds of wisdom through ancient teachings like this parable, waiting for you to have the humility to learn and the courage to apply it. The tears that God sees when you cry in frustration with your financial situation are not in vain. Every tear is collected, every pain is seen, but He waits for you to get up and do something different. Einstein said that insanity is doing the same thing repeatedly, expecting different results. If you continue spending more than you earn, burying your talents, running from responsibilities, and hoping that magically things will improve, you're living that insanity. Heaven is silent, but God is acting through every biblical principle you choose to obey or ignore. Spiritual freedom with money is not absence of financial challenges. It's presence of peace even in the midst of them. Confidence that you're doing your part and God will do His. And here we arrive at the heart of the matter, at the core of everything. Jesus was teaching through this powerful parable. He doesn't want money to control you, but wants you to be free, free from fear, free from guilt, free from the mental scarcity that imprisons you, free from the fear of losing because you understand that what comes from God doesn't get lost, it only transforms and multiplies. Free from the guilt of having or not having, because you understand it's not about how much you have, but about what you do with what you have. Free from the scarcity mentality that makes you believe it's never enough, that you'll never have enough, that you need to clutch every penny with tooth and nail, because tomorrow might lack. Having faith in Jesus Christ in this context means living against the grain of this sick mentality that dominates modern society. It means planting with generosity even when the harvest seems distant. It means investing in people and eternal purposes, not just in temporary returns. It means waking up every day thanking for what you have instead of complaining about what's missing. It means looking at that one talent in your hands, whatever it may be, an artistic gift, a technical skill, a little money, free time, a valuable network, and consciously deciding that you won't bury it out of fear, but will multiply it by faith. And when you do this, something supernatural happens. You discover that true wealth was never about money, but about becoming the type of person in whom God can trust increasingly greater responsibilities, knowing that you will manage them for His glory and the good of the people around you. conclusion. So, after everything you just heard, after this entire journey through Jesus' deep teachings about money, talents, and purpose, there remains one question that only you can answer. What are you going to do now? Will you continue being that third servant, burying your gifts, your opportunities, your resources out of fear of failure? Or will you make the courageous decision to unearth everything you hid and start multiplying, even if gradually, even if with fear, but moving despite it? When God speaks to the heart at this moment, He's not asking for perfection, He's asking for action, movement, faithfulness with the little you have now. Look at your life today. What talents have you been setting aside? What money is sitting idle when it could be growing? What time are you wasting when you could be building something eternal? God sustained me is not a phrase for you to repeat passively, but a declaration of war against mediocrity, against paralyzing fear, against the victim mentality that keeps you trapped. Are you willing to leave your comfort zone and risk it? Are you ready to stop comparing yourself with those who received 5 talents while you only have 1, and start working with excellence on what's in your hands? Think with me, a year from now, do you want to look back and see that you continued in the same situation, complaining about the same things, with the same fears, with the same buried talents? Or do you want to see growth, multiplication, real transformation? You are not alone. God is with you on this journey, but He won't do for you what only you can do. He won't unearth your talents. You need to grab the shovel and dig. He won't invest your money. You need to study, learn, and make decisions. He won't use your gifts. You need to develop them and put them into practice. God saw your pain, saw your tears, saw your frustrations, but now He's giving you a choice. Continue crying or start building. When God heard your prayer asking for change, He didn't send an angel to do everything for you. He gave you this message, this teaching, this powerful parable to wake up something inside you that was asleep. When everything seemed lost, it was precisely then that God was preparing the ground for the new. So tell me, will you take advantage? Here's your practical challenge for this week. Not for next month, not for when conditions are perfect, but for now. Choose one talent you buried and do something concrete with it. If it's idle money, open an investment account today. If it's an artistic gift, create something and share. If it's knowledge, teach someone. If it's time, invest in a project that matters. Do something the third servant didn't do. Move. God acts in silence while you work loudly, while you sweat, while you fail and learn and try again. The tears that God sees today will turn into testimony tomorrow, but only if you act it. Heaven is silent, but God is acting through every courageous choice you make, every calculated risk you take, every step of faith you take, even while trembling. Having faith in Jesus Christ is not standing still, waiting for a miracle to fall from heaven. It's working as if everything depended on you and praying as if everything depended on God. So get up, shake off the dust, grab that buried talent, and start multiplying. And look, if this message touched your heart in any way, if you felt that God was speaking directly to you through this ancient parable, I need to ask you something. Don't keep this just to yourself. Share this video with that person you know is paralyzed by fear, with that friend who is burying their talents, with that family member who needs to hear that God hasn't given up on them. But before running off, answer me here in the comments. What is the talent you're going to unearth this week? Write it down there. Assume this commitment publicly, because when you declare it, you create accountability. I want to read each comment, want to know what decision you'll make after hearing all this. Will you continue being the third servant, or will you enter into the joy